Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Lung Association's State of the Air 2023 briefing for our partners working with health, the environment, and environmental justice. The Lung Association released the 2023 report this morning, and we are excited to share the results with you. In a moment, my colleagues will walk you through the grades and rankings and are eager to take your questions. But first, I want to express my appreciation to all of you for your interest in this report and for your tireless work to protect public health from dangerous air pollution. Over the 24 years the Lung Association has released the State of the Air report, we have seen dramatic improvements in air quality in much of the country. That is thanks to your hard work to secure protections under the Clean Air Act and ensure that they are enforced. But of course, this year's report underscores what we already know. Communities of color still bear a disproportionate burden from air pollution exposure. In addition, climate change is making air pollution worse in many places. We want to make sure that the state of air is a useful resource as possible for you and your collective work to ensure healthy air for all. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, not just today, but throughout the year. Finally, I'll close with a couple quick logistical notes. First, we are recording this webinar. And second, please type your questions into the Q&A box throughout today's presentation. We look forward to hearing from you. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'll turn the call back to my colleague, Laura Kate Bender.
Thanks so much, Deb, and thanks again to everyone for joining today. I'm Laura Kate Bender, she, her pronouns, and I am the National Assistant Vice President for Healthy Air with the American Lung Association. I'll kick us off today with diving into the results of our State of the Air report released today. I will then hand it over to my colleague, Liz, who will walk you through the website and opportunities for engagement, and then we'll take your questions. So as a quick reminder, as Deb said, please do use the Q&A box to ask questions throughout the presentation. We will address as many as we can at the end, and anything we don't have time for, we will follow up with you. We really value the questions and the opportunity to engage. So many of you are very familiar with this report, and I see a lot of familiar faces in the attendee list, so thanks for joining us again this year. But I'll give a quick reminder of what it covers and why we release it every year. Today's release is our 24th annual report. We release State of the Air to put air pollution into everyday language so that the groups and the general public that we all communicate with can understand the quality of the air that they're breathing, to give localized information at the city and county level. We focus on two main outdoor air pollutants, ozone pollution and particle pollution. And we look at the counties that have official EPA monitors to get the data in this report. I'll note that that is 922 counties that have EPA monitors out of more than 3,000 total counties in the US. So many counties do not have grades, but we grade whoever has a monitor with complete data. And then the report also includes rankings, including the 25 metro areas with the worst pollution for each measure and for the cleanest. Of course, many of us work in advocacy, so this report is a critical advocacy tool. Of course, the local data is important for the public, but also for decision makers. We use this report every year to help underscore the key message that everyone deserves clean air. It's an opportunity to highlight environmental justice and health equity issues in the results. And we also include advocacy priorities and tools for taking action, which Liz will talk more about. We also have stories. So for example, this story in the report text is one of several that we've included throughout, both in the print version and the website, to put a personal face on the impact of air pollution. So I will quickly recap a bit about why we care about the two main pollutants in this report. So first, we look at particle pollution, a mixture of tiny bits of stuff, often called soot. It comes from a variety of sources, including vehicles, especially diesel-powered ones, industrial sources, power plants, fires, wood burning, and wildfires included. And there are different sizes of PM. We are specifically looking at PM 2.5, or fine particulate matter, in this report. The report grades fine particulate matter in two different ways. First, we look at the annual average. That is a pass-fail grade. And we also look at the number of days in which particle pollution levels spike to unhealthy levels. We give an A through F grade for that measure. And we also look at ozone. Ozone is, of course, a gas that forms when other emissions like volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides react in the presence of sunlight. We grade ozone in one way. We look at the number of days on which it was unhealthy to breathe thanks to ozone, and we give A through F grades. And of course, the health impacts of both of these pollutants are many. Speaking broadly, everything from lung health impacts like asthma attacks, wheezing and coughing, and worsening of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and then a host of other health harms across numerous systems in the body, leading up into premature death. I'll note with lung cancer in particular, that is a specific impact of particle pollution. So what did we find in this year's report? Well, first I'll highlight the overarching number that nearly 120 million people live in areas with unhealthy levels of air pollution. So 120 people almost live in counties that had unhealthy levels of at least one of the three measures in our report. There's good and bad news here. So first, that is fewer people than last year, 17.6 million fewer people. However, that progress is not equally shared. There are two big takeaways for that. One is that there's a disparity between the East and the West, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And of course, we continue to see, and we all know that we would expect to see a disparity between white people and people of color in terms of exposure to unhealthy levels of air pollution. We also saw that while ozone pollution got better overall, spikes in particle pollution got worse. I mentioned almost 120 million people live in places with unhealthy levels. That is more than 3 in 10 Americans. And I'll note that people of color are more likely to live with polluted air. That includes 3.7 times as likely to live in a county that failed for all three measures of the report. Now, a couple of additional messages here before I dive in a bit more to the results specifics. One, this report is part of a 24-year trend, and overall that trend shows progress. So Liz will dig in on the website, but we have trend lines that show that overwhelmingly the story of the Clean Air Act is a successful one, that the nation has made major emissions reductions across the board. However, number one, climate change is beginning to undo some of that progress, like by fueling dangerous wildfires, droughts, and in some cases, unhealthy levels of ozone pollution on high heat days. And that, again, is driving a disparity as we've cleaned up industrial sources in the eastern half of the country and improved air quality overall. We are seeing big upticks, especially in particle pollution in the West, as those wildfires continue to dominate air quality readings. So here is a look at short-term PM grades from back in 2008. The size of each dot corresponds with county population, so bigger dots are more populous counties. Reds are Fs and blues, light blues are As. So here's the distribution of As and Fs in counties in 2008. And here it is in 2023. As you can see, we have seen a big shift westward, whereas almost all the red dots are in the west and the east is looking a lot more blue for short-term particle pollution. We see the same trend with other measures. So here is the annual, that's the day in, day out average particle pollution. This is what it looked like in 2008. Again, red is failing grade, blue is passing grade. And here's what it looked like in 2023. Again, a dramatic shift westward when it comes to who is failing for this measure. And finally, we see a similar pattern with ozone. Here is the 2008 map showing overwhelming failing grades for ozone, including across almost all the eastern half of the country's counties measured. And here it is in 2023, a lot more blue in the east, continuing to see stubborn pockets across the country, but particularly in the west. So digging into each of those results, I mentioned that we have three different measures. So I'll look at deadly particle pollution first. So nearly 64 million people lived with dangerous spikes in short-term particle pollution in this year's report. So failing grades for that measure. The 14 of the 25 most polluted cities did worse this year than they did last year. And 7 of those cities had their most on record. So their highest number, which is a weighted average of high particle days. We're also seeing that not only are there more days and more people exposed to unhealthy spikes in particles, but also we're continuing to see very unhealthy purple days and hazardous maroon days for daily particle pollution, similar to what we saw last year. And we know that wildfires driven by climate change are continuing to increase in frequency and severity, helping to contribute to this trend we've seen this year and last year in the report of these very unhealthy and hazardous days. In terms of the most polluted cities for short-term fine particle pollution, as I mentioned, we have the top 25 in our report, here the top 10. And as you'll note, this is a very Western-dominated list. In terms of year-round particle pollution, this actually got a little bit better this year. So we had nearly 18 million people live in places that got Fs for their levels of year-round annual average particle pollution. As a reminder, this is a pass-fail grade. Of the top 25 most polluted, 15 had increased year-round levels, however, and we saw 2 cities in California and Washington with their worst levels ever. We did see improvement across 9 cities. So basically, overall, with this measure, we've seen a pattern of slow improvement over the past 5 years of reports, but of course, still too many people living in places with a failing grade for this measure. Again, here's the list of 10 of the top 25 most polluted cities for annual particulate matter. With this list, unlike the worst places for short-term particles, this is a little more distributed around the country. You'll still see the largest share is made up of cities affected by Western droughts and wildfires, but there are still some Eastern and Midwestern cities with power plant, industrial, mobile source emissions continuing to show up on the list. And finally, ozone. So some good news on ozone. Overall, 103 million people live in counties with unhealthy levels of ozone. Of course, far too many. But it's better than last year. That is 19 million fewer people than last year. And it's actually the fewest number of counties getting an F in the history of the report. Also, the top 25 most polluted cities for ozone had fewer bad air days on average, 6 seeing their best levels ever. And again, here is the top 10 of those top 25 most polluted cities for ozone. We also look at the cleanest cities. So I'll note a lot of places, as I mentioned earlier, have no monitors. So this obviously does not reflect places that would reach this list but don't have monitors. But these are the cleanest cities across all 3 measures of the pollutants covered, listed in alphabetical order. And then one other question that we get, because this year's report covers data from 2019, 2020, and 2021, what about COVID-19? What impact did we see from people staying off the road, staying at home, due to, particularly in the early days of the pandemic? So the answer is we're not entirely sure. We know that we saw lots of media reports about reduced air pollution in the early days, when generally there was a lot less traffic on many roads. That could have potentially contributed to some of the improved ozone levels that we're seeing, but we're not able to verify that. We'll need to look at more data across future years to confirm. We do know that research has found a connection between long-term exposure to air pollution and worse disease outcomes, and we certainly know that air pollution exposure increases susceptibility to respiratory infections in general. So there certainly is a connection between the overlapping threats of COVID-19 and harmful air pollution. I'll also note that not everyone necessarily saw the clean air that the media reported, particularly in the early days of the 2020 lockdowns. Many places with a nearby industrial shipping center, warehouse distribution center, saw a lot of truck traffic as we all got more stuff shipped to us. And so, people who live near those places did not necessarily see fewer vehicles on the roads. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Liz Scott, in just a moment, but first I will thank folks who have already entered questions into the chat so far. Please continue to do so. I'll be monitoring throughout Liz's presentation, and then we'll be ready to answer your questions when she's finished. Thanks so much, and Liz, take it away.
Thanks, Kate. Hello, everyone. I'm going to walk through how to navigate the State of the Air webpage, which is probably going to be the easiest way for you to search for data. We've made a couple of updates to the look of the pages this year that I'm really excited about, and we'll talk about a little bit later. So the full report exists at lung.org/SOTA or SOTA. You will see this lovely stained glass version of lungs when you view the homepage. The menu at the top is where you can select which feature you want to view. We've got our report cards that Laura Kate just went through, where you can find the cleanest or most polluted list, the map of states, or the list of metropolitan areas. You can also view under this tab the Compare Your Air tool that was featured in last year's report. So you can compare the air of your area with that of another. We have our key findings for the report, a deeper dive into the health impacts of air pollution, and our recommendations for action section, which outlines our advocacy ask. The easiest way to find your grade will be to input your zip code or state, and there's a spot to do that right on the home page by hitting the select location button. If you click on a state, you will get the list of only the counties that have monitors, which is a new feature this year that I think really helps paint a picture of just how much more is needed in terms of investments for air monitors. We do still have data for every county for groups at risk, regardless of monitor status. And if you type in your zip code into the select location finder, you'll get to your county page, regardless of if they have a monitor or not. This is what a state page looks like for Illinois. You'll see that it shows data for only 23 out of 102 counties. You can toggle the graphs to view whether you want to look at the ozone grades or the particle pollution grades or the populations at risk. The first column, you'll see the county that has a monitor, and then the second, you'll be able to see the grade and the weighted average. The grades are also color coded, so the darker the color, the worse the grade. If you search for or you click on your county, you'll find the grades with the color coding at the top, as well as a button that can take you to view the metropolitan region that your county is in. You'll also see trend charts for how your county has fared in previous reports and the information on the populations at risk. You'll notice on this example for the PM annual measurement, it says INC, which is a good reminder to say that that means the data that we have for this county is incomplete, so we couldn't offer a grade. If you see a DNC in any measure, it means that we did not collect data because that county does not have a monitor. The Metro Region page will show you a map with a color-coded, zoomable, scrollable map. This gives you a good idea of what is referred to by a city. These metropolitan statistical areas can cover a large area with many counties. In the graph, the bright blue line on the trend chart shows the weighted average for this pollutant for every 3-year period since reporting began. The dark blue line represents current thresholds for meeting the standard. As Laura Kate mentioned, in most cases, you'll see a downward trend over time, thanks to the Clean Air Act. The stat for the change since at the top gives you an idea of the magnitude of the change. For the Chicago metro region, an average of 26 fewer unhealthy days for daily particle pollution occurred in the last 24 years. As I mentioned, there are other sections of the report that you will find useful. We have our key findings that details the nationwide results, the trends for each pollutant, the worst 25 cities, populations at risk, and the most polluted and cleanest places to live. The health impacts of air pollution is honestly a site that I refer back to on a regular basis throughout the course of the year. It lists the specific health impacts that come from exposure to ozone or particle pollution. And then we have our recommendations for action, which I'll get to in a bit later. So I'm going to put my best data scientist hat on to walk you through how we get the data and issue our grades and rankings. So first, what is the process? First, we get the data from EPA, and our report relies on the 3 most recent quality assured data years. So as has been mentioned, this year's report, states collected air pollution data from 2019, 2020, and 2021, which EPA then reviews and posts online. We have our consultant download the data, and then we use this data to calculate unhealthy days, our weighted averages, design values, grades, and rankings. Once we calculate the grades, they are shared with the state or local air agencies for their review before we confirm the grades with them and calculate the rankings, which serve as the basis for all of the state of the air resources we're discussing today. That includes our best and worst list, our trends, state and county web pages, PDFs, materials, any other region specific info. We grade on a scale using the air quality index categorization for an unhealthy day. So those are the orange, red, purple, and maroon days. Days at worst levels, such as purple and maroon, count for more days at lower levels than such as orange, because we know that the more unhealthy the day is, the more at risk health is. Annual PM is a little bit different and uses a pass-fail grade based on whether a county or a city is above or below EPA's National Ambient Air Quality Standard for particulate matter. It is important to note that if a county does not have a monitor, we cannot issue a grade. In fact, as Laura Kate mentioned, out of the 3,200 counties in the United States, only about 922 have monitors, which leaves over 70 million people living in areas that are currently not collecting data. I am really excited about the way that the new web page looks out, so that you see on the state page only counties that have monitors, because it really highlights how much more work is left to do. I wish we could snap our fingers and get a monitor for every county, but those are determinations that are made by EPA and the states, not by us. The other thing to note is, as I mentioned, the example had INC for incomplete. So that while some states might have monitors in a county, they might have some malfunctions, or there are otherwise problems reporting the data over the course of the 3 years included in the report. So if we don't have data, even if there is a monitor, we won't issue grades. We have separate rankings for short-term particle pollution, year-round particle pollution, and ozone. We rank cities by their most polluted county. Some cities might only have one county, but most have multiple. We use the worst county, as we know that air pollution is not confined by borders and can travel to neighboring communities. We define cities based on the Office of Management and Budget guidelines for metropolitan statistical areas and combined statistical areas, which are larger multi-city urban areas such as the Washington, Baltimore, Arlington region. OMB determines these metros based on distance, commuting, economic relationships, and some other factors. State of the Air is a fantastic advocacy opportunity. So I'm going to walk through what our priorities are for the report this year. Our message is to call on President Biden to urgently move forward on several measures to clean up air pollution nationwide, including new pollution limits on ozone and particle pollution, and new measures to clean up power plants and vehicles. EPA has a ton of rules that they are currently working on or are expected to be working on very soon. So this advocacy ask really encompasses the whole picture and how we need to see a healthier zero emission future. You can find the petition in many places throughout the report page, but typing in lung.org/SOTA-petition will take you directly there. Our recommendations for action section walks the user through different opportunities at different levels, ranging from the individual all the way up to federal lawmakers. The recommendations for individuals include things like protecting their own health by checking daily air pollution forecasts, and to protect the health of their communities by reducing their own personal contributions to air pollution. We also have the new law, the Inflation Reduction Act, that was passed last year, and it includes some tax credits for electric vehicles and appliances that individuals could apply for. Local governments can take action by adopting a climate action plan that encourages residents to pay attention to climate change and understand how the city as a whole can address it. They can also purchase zero emission fleets of vehicles. This would include recycling trucks, transit buses, and the one that I know I'm most looking forward to, clean school buses. They can also work to purchase energy through renewable non-combustion electricity so that the city, the county, the locality is powered by clean non-combustion energy. State, territorial, and tribal governments can go a step further by setting a clean electricity standard, determining a certain percentage of all electricity generated or used in the state comes from those renewable non-combustion sources. There are also a lot of funding opportunities that exist in the Inflation Reduction Act to limit pollution. And states also have the ability to adopt California's stronger emission standards for cars and trucks, which is the #1 priority. The federal government has a lot on its to-do list. Our advocacy ask is directed to President Biden because many of these rules are already proposed at EPA, but the administration is behind in getting them across the finish line. As for Congress, we know that we're not going to have another landmark law like the Inflation Reduction Act this year, but Congress can and should invest more in air monitors and take any actions available to work on pollution cleanup. So how can you help elevate the report from an advocacy perspective? Please share the report and share our petition far and wide, and the recommendations for action section that includes those ideas for leaders at every level. Any chance that you have to include our advocacy ask and highlight the report, we appreciate. The success of this report really is in part because we have great partners who can help get it out there. To that point, we will be holding a Twitter storm on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be tweeting from our account for an hour from 2 to 3, and we encourage you to interact with us and to retweet or quote retweet us, highlighting how air pollution matters to you and your organization using the hashtag state of the air. And lastly, on May 23rd, the Lung Association is joining EV Hybrid NOR for a webinar on a new report on the health benefits of zero emission cars and electricity. We're proud to have done a few of these electric vehicle reports highlighting the benefits of a zero emission transportation sector, and this new report will focus specifically on the light duty.
Liz, friendly amendment. The EV Hybrid Noir presentation will focus on state of the air, and then in the following month in June will be the new EV report.
Thank you. And with that, I know I've been seeing pings come through in the multiple windows I have open, so we're happy to answer any questions that you all will have.
Yes, I have a couple already. Thank you so much. So first, good questions on whether the recording, slides, and images are available. So for the recording, yes, we will get you a link to the recording to this presentation as soon as it is available. In terms of the slides, I don't plan to share them broadly, but if you have a specific slide or graphics need, reach out to me. It's laura.bender@lung.org, and I'll put that in the Q&A as well, or in the chat too, so everyone can see it. We're happy to work with you. Another good question I got, is there an easy way to access semi-customizable data? For example, how many and what percentage of people of color suffer from poor air quality in a state compared to the demographics of the state as a whole? So the quick answer is there is a way, but it's not particularly easy through the website. So as Liz has pointed out, the website, when you go to the state pages, will list every county in the state that has a grade for each measure. And then it also has a complete list of estimated totals of populations at risk. So for example, if you pulled up the California page, you could get an estimate of people of color in terms of population for each county. So you can use those charts combined, if you were to crunch some numbers to get to the example that you're asking for. If you have a specific need, though, for a couple places, again, do reach out to me. We might be able to help you crunch the data or pull it more easily on our side. Give me 1 second to see what else is popping up. All right. What steps does the Biden administration need to take to get these rules from EPA across the finish line? So depends on the rule. The recommendations for action section that Liz has highlighted has a suite of rules listed, and they're at different stages. So in terms of the vehicles proposals, the EPA has proposed stronger emissions limits for future cars and trucks. EPA needs to finalize them. For rules to clean up carbon pollution from the power sector, EPA needs to propose and finalize them. What we've decided to do here is that in every case, these are all part of a greater need to ramp up urgency and ambition in the Biden administration. The to-do list is long, and we're not pretending it's not. There are a ton of important steps that EPA needs to take to cut down on emissions across vehicles, the power sector, the oil and gas sector, to strengthen national limits on ozone and particle pollution. They're all critical, and they're all huge opportunities for health, air quality, and environmental justice. So we're using this year's action as a way to boost overall ambition by calling on the administration to hurry and get these rules out the door and make them strong. Can you talk through an example of what may cause an area to have very different grades for the 2 PM measures? For example, Asheville is tied for first for cleanest for daily PM, but 186 worst for annual PM. Yeah, Elizabeth, great question. So I'll say off the bat, I can take a look, but it could be that the annual PM measure is not actually that far off, given the fact that most places are passing for that annual level of PM as opposed to failing. When it comes to differences between spikes and year-round averages, we typically see this in places do much worse for spikes, so that they had very unhealthy days a few times over the report period, even though it averaged out to a level that was less alarming. And I can follow up with you with more specifics on the Asheville example.
I'll note that for 186 worst, it is out of 220 some, so it's closer to the bottom of the worst.
Next, I see electric school buses are great. Extra ambulances should be the next focus to my mind. Is there any effort to support this? Great point. I generally point to our friends at Healthcare Without Harm for efforts to green the health sector, but I will find out specifically and follow up with you. I see a great suggestion in the chat to check out EPA's EJ screen or other data opportunities. And I'll pause and see, remind folks that you can type your questions. I'm monitoring both the chat and the Q&A. All right, what is the thinking around incorporating some of the non-EPA monitoring in this analysis? For example, New York State is doing a state-led community-based monitoring effort to better understand local air quality. Those won't be official regulatory monitors. So what about more citizen science and crowdsourced air quality data? Great question. That is a question that we are asking ourselves. We know that as we've pointed out, there are a lot of places with no data, thanks to the placement of EPA's regulatory monitors. So yes, it is a conversation we're having. Definitely too early to have an answer to it. The thing that I'll add is not only is there data out there from low-cost sensors that individuals might have, there's also data from NASA. NASA has air quality data from satellites and actually just launched a new satellite to begin collecting additional air quality data. And I'm happy to share that link out with folks. One question I don't know the answer to: are there governmental agencies looking at EV conversion kits being more cost effective and available? I don't know. Good question, and I will find out. We've highlighted just as a general overview in the individual recommendations for action section that folks should check out the Inflation Reduction Act's tax credits, but I don't know about specific opportunities around EV conversion kits. And I see another question. What do you tell people who live in a county sandwiched between two failing counties, but not in the report card because that county does not have a monitor? I would point folks to the metro area in those situations. When we calculate the rankings for the metro area, we take into account the fact that just like the census defines metro areas, we know that people are moving within a county, between counties within a metro area. So that ranking covers the counties, even if the county specifically does not have its own monitor. A good reminder, contact your local or state air agency for data questions and discussions about air quality management. batchers. Always a good point, and we very much appreciate the state air agency folks who work with us to verify the data on this report. I have a lull in the questions. Liz, is there anything that you have wanted to add?
No, I would just say, I echo contacting state and local air agencies for data, but also whenever possible, meet with your federal, state decision makers and encourage them to invest in air monitoring so that we can get more monitors in counties. They love to talk, apparently.
What other questions or thoughts that folks want to share? I'll give it another couple of minutes so folks have time to type. Another couple of great questions popping in. So first, states submit their air monitoring plans for public comment periodically. What should we be saying to them in those instances? When it comes to air monitoring specifically, we can follow up and see if we, I would imagine the recommendations generally depend on the place. So if you have a specific comment opportunity coming up, feel free to reach out. We're happy to connect with you about it. And then how do you deal with bad air that moves and impacts other areas, giving one area a better grade and another area a bad grade? Great question. So in the report, we don't specifically look at whose pollution comes from where, but when we look at a metro area's ranking, we do grade them by the most polluted county in the metro area, acknowledging again that people move within a metro area and that air moves within a metro area. However, from a policy perspective, we have strongly supported EPA's efforts and urged them to strengthen their efforts to clean up air pollution that crosses state lines. The Clean Air Act has a provision that ensures that states that have polluting sources that are contributing to ozone problems downwind have to clean up those sources. And I'm happy to share more information on those advocacy efforts if you want to reach out to me. It would be helpful to compile a list of state and local air agencies so people know where to contact. I believe we can pass along some resources. Potentially the National Association of Clean Air Agencies may be a place to share that out, so we can see if we can get you a link. Is pollution source data available by county? Example, fossil fuel combustion versus wildfire source. No, not as part of the report, but again, some of the media coverage that we've generated around the report has highlighted examples of polluting sources or events like wildfires. So if you have a question about a specific area, again, feel free to reach out and we can connect you with our best thoughts on where that's coming from. In Western North Dakota, there's low population density, few monitors, but high impact. Is there a place to get more data in those areas, especially the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation and Bakken Play? In Bakken, no metro area nearby. Yeah, this is a great example of the challenges with the limitations of EPA's regulatory monitors. We know that in many cases, they're placed to maximize the population covered, and that places with particularly oil and gas development often have elevated levels of pollution that are not necessarily captured by these monitors. So I think the most immediate thing I will do is share the information that NASA currently has with folks, because again, their satellites can cover for some pollutants what a different set of places than EPA's monitors. And just know that this is very much a conversation that we're having internally too, is how do we better understand the air quality issues in those places. Another good question on timing. Fires from last year would not have been considered in this report. Correct. So New Mexico's huge fires will factor in next year. Yes, correct. The report covers 2019, 2020, and 21 because those are the three most recent years assured data from EPA. It takes time to get all that data quality assured. So there is a bit of a lag, and then that 3-year average helps us maintain consistency from year to year, and avoids big aberrations in affecting air quality results too much and giving a false impression of how the overall air is in an area. On messaging around air quality, do advocates find greater success, i.e. getting them to take action, with politicians or office holders by talking about the air quality locally, or by talking about local air quality issues in tandem with concern about the local contributions to worldwide climate change, to which the local air quality or lack thereof contributes? Is it better to keep the issues separate in advocacy efforts? Liz, I'm going to hand that one to you because I bet you have an answer.
Yeah, I think that the more local you can get, the better. And I think the determination on whether to tie in the broader global climate change challenge will very much depend on the decision maker that you are talking to. But one of the really immense values of this report is that we can get local. When it comes to federal decision makers, we obviously don't have this broken out by congressional district, but you can more often than not get as close to a congressional district as possible by highlighting the region or a few counties that exist within a congressperson's district, for example. So I always lead with the local, and then how far beyond that I go really depends on the office or the decision maker that I'm speaking with.
Great. And I see some more questions coming in. Is there an easy place to download some of the data tables in the report, such as the county grades? Not in Excel form. The print version of the report available at lung.org/SOTA is something that you can download, save, whatever needs you have. I'll note that the online tables at lung.org/SOTA on, for example, on a state page, you now have the ability to sort the list of counties and their grades. So you can sort by county alphabetically, you can sort by grade, and you can sort by weighted average in terms of ozone pollution and weighted average in terms of particle pollution. So do check that out. If you have additional data needs that we might be able to help with, again, for individual issues, we're happy to help you dig in.
I'll take this question from Hayden. Any sense of how far recent funding from Congress for air quality monitoring might be expected to go in filling some gaps or addressing limitations, and how much more funding from the federal government might be required? So yes, in recent years, the Congress has passed some additional funding for air quality monitoring, specifically targeted for environmental justice areas. And so that is a mixture of competitive grants and direct dollars to states to do monitoring. I will note that this is incredibly helpful. It is helpful to fill in some of the gaps that exist, but it is not a replacement for some dedicated dependable appropriated funds for air quality monitoring. And so for the totals needed, we really take the lead of our partners, the National Association of Clean Air Agency and the National Tribal Air Association, the air agencies who are actually doing the work to say what it is that they need. And the needs for air quality monitoring are much greater than what the current funds are through the regular appropriations process. So I'm always happy to talk in more wonky details about the appropriations for air monitoring. So please always reach out to us.
Another good question. Does the SOTA data report retain data that is flagged as exceptional events by state and local monitoring agencies? Yes. So as background for folks, we calculate the grades differently from how EPA calculates whether or not a community is meeting the national ambient air quality standards. One of those things that EPA does differently is exempt days on which pollution was tagged as an exceptional event. So it came from a cause other than something that what the community might be able to control. We don't exclude those days because we are doing something different. We're trying to give the public an understanding of the quality of the air that they're breathing, and your lungs don't care if it's an exceptional event or not. So we want to have that be included in the grades. That also means that our grades won't always align with whether a community actually has been deemed in non-attainment with an EPA standard, because again, we're counting everything. All right, I'm seeing another lull in the questions, but we want to be here and answer any more that come in. So we'll give it another couple minutes for folks to keep typing if you're thinking of something.
That was a good second wind.
As folks can see, I've just added my email into the chat and the Q&A. Again, if you, we'll give folks another minutes here today. But if you have flagged a need, please do reach out for me and we'll help you get you what you need to use this report to the best of its ability. And I know there have been some great questions asked so far today that we haven't had immediate answers for, have promised follow up on. What I will likely do is if there are specific individual issues to follow up with folks on, I'll do that. But then there's some resources, for example, the link to state and local air agency contacts or the NASA resources that I'll share out with the full group along with the recording after this webinar.
I will take this time to remind everyone that we will be doing a Twitter storm on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So please be sure to hop on to the social medias and use the hashtag State of the Air. You can follow our Lung Association account. We'll be tweeting for the whole hour and really appreciate your amplification of this report.
And we will also share some sample posts between now and then. Any final questions? All right, well, thank you. Thank you all. As we say every year, we could not do this without you. We really appreciate everyone's continued interest in the report, your amplification and willingness to use it. And we always, always, always value your feedback and how it could be even more useful to you. So please reach out to me, laura.bender@lung.org. Join us for the Twitter storm on Friday. And, not just today, but on an ongoing basis, please do keep letting us know how State of the Air can be more useful to you. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you all soon.